Hello. Today's topic are macromolecules, and make sure you guys are filling out your chart while we go through this PowerPoint. So, what are macromolecules? Macromolecules are large molecules that are formed by joining smaller organic molecules together. So make sure you guys write that definition in the middle. Macro means large, and so macromolecules are also known as polymers. Poly equals many, and polymers are made up of many monomers joined together. Mono is one, and so monomers are the smaller subunits or the building blocks of polymers. All biological macromolecules are organic, and in science, organic means that it contains carbon. So there are four macromolecules that we are going to discuss today: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. The first one we're going to talk about are carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are made up of monosaccharides. So monosaccharides are the building blocks of carbohydrates. Saccharides, when you hear the word saccharide, think of sugar. Saccharide means sugar. Mono is one. So monosaccharide would be a simple sugar. Glucose, fructose are both examples of monosaccharides. Why are carbohydrates important? Carbohydrates are important because they are our body's main source of energy. So we get our energy from carbohydrates. Simple sugars provide us with fast-acting energy. So like if you eat like an apple, you'll get energy right away. Complex sugars or starches provide you with long-lasting energy. And so a lot of times athletes will load up on carbohydrates or pasta before an athletic event so that they can have that long-lasting energy. Another function of carbohydrates are that they provide structure and support. Some examples of carbohydrates, Some examples of carbohydrates would be grains, pastas, fruits, vegetables, sugar, honey, and potatoes. Cellulose is very important in plant cells. Plant cells are made up of cellulose, and cellulose is an example of a carbohydrate. Some additional information about carbohydrates are that they are made up of carbon, the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a ratio of 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogen atoms for each carbon. So you'll see it written as this. So for every carbon atom, there are one oxygen and 2 hydrogen atoms. And so the carbohydrate can have 50 of these molecules, or they can have 100. And if 2 monosaccharides join together, they form disaccharides. Sucrose is an example of a disaccharide. It is made up of lactose, and lactose, or sucrose, is a combination of 2 different sugars joined together. Poly, like we said before, means many. So polysaccharides are many sugars or complex sugars. So starches, glycogen, cellulose are examples of polysaccharides. The next macromolecule we're going to talk about are lipids. Lipids are fats, oils, and waxes. There is no, This is my first time recording a video, so please bear with me. There is no true monomer for lipids. And so you guys can leave that part blank where it says, well, for building blocks, we'll put composed of fatty acids, glycerol, and other components. And so you guys can see some examples of lipids in this picture. Why are lipids important? Lipids are important in storing energy. And they also are important for insulation. They provide warmth. You see the walrus, it has a lot of fat and blubber to keep warm. Lipids also prevent water loss. Lipids don't mix with water. So when we're talking about the properties of water, and we said that water is a polar molecule, lipids, on the other hand, are nonpolar. They don't mix with water. And so our cell membranes are made up of lipids, and that's a good thing because the cell membrane is kind of controls what goes into and out of the cell. Also, on plant leaves, they have like a waxy cuticle that prevents water loss. And then honeycomb in a beehive is another example of a lipid. Some more examples of lipids are butter, oils, different oils like olive oil, peanut oil, vegetable oil, avocados, wax, plant cuticles, steroids, cholesterol. So these are all examples of lipids that you can write down. Make sure you pause if you need to pause. Some additional information about lipids are that they are hydrophobic. So that means that they are water-faring. They don't mix well with water, or they don't mix at all with water. And so lipids are solid at room temperature. And then, so that would be called the triglyceride, the solid lipids. And then they are, some lipids are liquid at room temperature, and those would be oils. So the lipids that are solid at room temperature are triglycerides. The lipids that are liquid at room temperature are oils. And you have lipids with single bonds, and some lipids have at least one double bond. Some lipids have many double bonds. So lipids that have only single bonds are saturated. Those are saturated fats. Lipids with at least one double bond are unsaturated. And then the lipids that have many double bonds are polyunsaturated. So if you guys go to and you look at food labels, you'll see saturated, unsaturated, and that's what those terms mean. It just has to do with the number of bonds. The next macromolecule that we are going to talk about are proteins. So make sure you are in your box for proteins. And the building blocks of proteins are amino acids. There are 20 different amino acids, and you guys can see some examples of amino acids over here on this chart. And our bodies can make 10 of the 20 amino acids. The rest of the amino acids that we need, we have to get from our food. So that's why it's so important for us to eat, because there are certain nutrients and essential amino acids that we need to get from the food that we eat. And so that's why it's important also to make sure you're eating food with protein so that you can get those amino acids that you need to build proteins. So proteins are very important to our body. They are involved in almost every function of our body. They provide structural support. They help build muscle. So if you're trying to gain muscle, then you need to make sure that you are getting in your protein. They communicate signals between cells. They help speed up chemical reactions. Enzymes are examples of proteins. And then they also control cell growth. So proteins are very important. Some examples of foods that we can find protein in are meats, eggs, nuts, beans, fish, milk, A hemoglobin is an example of the protein it's an example of a protein, excuse me, and it's found in our blood. And then insulin is also another example of a protein that's very important with maintaining our blood sugar level. So some additional information about proteins are that the structure of a protein determines its function. So you have different shaped proteins, and some proteins are complex, some proteins are simple, but the structure of the protein determines what its function will be. Also, you guys need to know that proteins are made up of the elements carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, and sometimes sulfur. Proteins make up about 15% of our total body mass. Our hair, our nails, our skin are all made up of protein. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you're getting a good amount of protein in your diet. Amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, are held together by peptide bonds in order to form proteins. And then, also, proteins are made by the ribosome. So in our cell unit, when we start to discuss different the functions of different organelles, you guys will need to remember that the ribosome is important for making proteins. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about the last macromolecule, which will be nucleic acids. And nucleic acids are made up of smaller subunits called nucleotides. And so nucleotides are made up of 3 parts. You have a sugar, you have a phosphate group, and then you have a nitrogen base. So those are the 3 components of a nucleotide. And the nucleotides are the building blocks of nucleic acids. So I'm sure you guys have heard of DNA. DNA is inside of many of our cells. And DNA is an example of a nucleic acid. RNA is also an example of a nucleic acid. And the DNA and RNA are short for deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid. So if you know the names of those 2 molecules, you know that they are nucleic acids because they have the name nucleic acid. So nucleic acids are important because they store and transmit genetic information. So for the function, you need to make sure that you are writing this down. Store and transmit genetic information. That's why they are so important. And here are some examples of nucleic acid, DNA, and RNA. And you can see that DNA is double-stranded, RNA is single-stranded. And we're going to, I didn't mean to do that. We are going to go into more detail about DNA and RNA when we are in our genetics unit. But this is a good overview of what's to come. Some additional information about, I didn't mean to do that, sorry. Additional information about nucleic acids are that they are made up of the elements carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and hydrogen. Also, like I just said, DNA is double-stranded. It's only found in the nucleus. RNA is single-stranded, and it's found outside of the nucleus. And that is it for macromolecules. Make sure if you didn't get something that you pause or that you rewind, rewatch the video if you need to rewatch the video. But just make sure that you have your notes completely filled in if you want to use them for the quiz. Have a great day.